thank you so much for taking a minute out for the program. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's begin our journey with this. Before we get into your good work as a founder, CEO, all of the good work you're doing, I want to begin with 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing the world. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you work and live today?
Yeah, the pandemic was a really interesting time for lots of people. And for me, I was head down. So at the time I was running one company, I was getting a doctorate with all the, healthcare stuff that you probably have read about. And so I was pretty head down thinking like, what is my role in helping people? But we were scared like anybody else. I had a conversation at dinner just the other night where we were reminiscing about like when food came in, we were like hand washing every piece of food, the bag itself. There was like, gloves and masks and all this stuff. And then, at one point, my wife was going to the grocery store because there's, people in our household have asthma and just the fear that was there. And I was looking back at pictures. I have pictures where I was at Los Angeles International Airport with not a single bag on the baggage carrier, not a single person in baggage claim, and not a single car outside picking somebody up because I had to travel for something that was very urgent, and it was post-apocalyptic. Like it was
Wow.
just it was nuts. And
Yeah.
so we had a radio show for some leaders that to talk about a black swan event. We had leaders from 6 continents show up every week for 6 weeks about how do you navigate just the entire mess of what was happening. And so it was yeah, I mean, it's a little surreal to look
Yeah.
back at it today.
It certainly is. At one point, I was interviewing a musician that was right next to Times Square, and he was like, it was a little drizzly. It was in April 2020, and he was like, "There's no one out, and I can't explain to you what this means." And I kept thinking, like, David Lynch and the creator of the Twilight Zone would run into each other in the middle of that fog, because it was bizarre. It was nothing that we had ever seen written. There's been movies, fictionalized movies about pandemics, but the way this materialized was bizarre, very bizarre.
Funny story. I joke with people that I might have been the cause of the pandemic because, a year before that, I said, I don't have any investments in commercial real estate anywhere in my portfolio. Like, it's got to be the best thing in the world. Like, what would ever happen that people would have to like move out of every office building in the world? Like, that's got to be the best investment of all time. And then the world was like, hold my beer. Like, let me just show you how this works.
Well, I'll tell you what, you can take that onus off of you because I think it was my dad. Years ago, we used to watch the Chiefs, and the Chiefs would always historically lose at the big moments. So they win in 2019, and I'm at that parade, and I remember hearing the echo of my dad saying, "If these bums ever win a Super Bowl, the whole world's going to shut down." And I was like, "Oh no."
Good.
That
I'm
was
glad to
it.
know it was your dad and not me. So thank you for
Yeah,
that. I feel
exactly.
I will leave the show feeling lighter.
But on another note, if San Francisco would have won, they were an epicenter. If that parade would have happened, they said that it would have completely spread in a whole different way. So that's another reason why I think we hold Mahomes and that whole ilk in high regard, because without them knowing they were health warriors. Um,
Yeah, that's great.
so let's get into what you do on a daily basis. There's a lot of titles, there's a lot of action. I'm going to put you in front of 13-year-olds. It's career day, and one of the kids wants you to synthesize your day job to make sense to their brains. How do you explain it?
Yeah, I would say that there's lots of things that happen in the world where we make choices that have health consequences. What we eat and how we exercise and how we choose to take medicine all have really important long-term consequences about how we feel today and how long we're going to live and how healthy we feel for that whole lifetime. And so what we do is we help people who've been very sick for a long period of time get healthy using medicine first, and then learning how food and exercise can help people have less medicine, less doctor's appointments, and to live not only longer, but to live healthier longer so they have more energy to do all the things they want to do to have fun and enjoy their lives.
I remember at one point during the pandemic, it was probably in May, I cut my thumb and I went to the ER. My wife was really worried. Like, you're in a pandemic. And I'm like, I'm going to be in the safest place in the world. And I remember getting in, and the ER doc was getting ready to go to Machu Picchu, and he couldn't do the trip, and he was really upset. And I just said, lay me straight on this pandemic. And he said, it's going to be the elderly and those that are already in bad shape that
Yeah.
that are going to be the most affected. And with what your answer is now, we've had time after the pandemic. Do you think that was a wake up call for people to get to this point where medicinally and otherwise, diet wise, that people have gotten to a better place, or is that kind of fog of war evaporated?
I don't, I can't point to something that says, hey, because of that, people are taking their health more seriously definitively. I think there's been more more movement culturally because of like the GLP-1 craze and all the things that are happening on that side,
Yeah,
probably more than which is interesting, right? Because the pandemic really showed us what can happen. But I haven't seen that hype in the media, and I haven't heard that from patients in our clinic. And
yeah,
so the answer is I don't know. I'm a scientist, so I can't give you like data about that. But
right.
anecdotally, I would say I wish it had had a bigger impact.
But it's interesting you do bring up the weight loss, the shots, because that is such a huge part of what people are
Yeah.
going after, and it's becoming way, way more widespread than I ever thought it would. And my only concern with that is that um, you know, as you very well know, when you want to make a lifestyle change, it's holistic. There's a lot of things that you have to do.
Yeah.
So if you're still just doing the shot and still taking down a bunch of soda and high fat stuff and whatever, however you're doing it, it's like it seems to me that there should be a holistic approach to that whole dichotomy of losing weight.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. We use GLP-1s in our practice every single day, and so for people to do it well, they have to exercise along with it. Otherwise, you run the risk of losing more muscle mass than you want to lose, and everyone knows that. That's not a big secret. And so I think that most people that I talk to are doing it pretty well. There are some people that aren't, but most people are doing a pretty good job of it. And so um, yeah, and look, I think just I think a week or two ago, there was a conference on oncology, cancer that I read about, where there was 40 different presentations, posters, papers that were presented that would seem to indicate that GLP-1s are having an impact on cancer that society is going to like as well. I don't think there was anything definitive, but I think it was directional and kind of hard to ignore. So I think we're going to keep finding out more and more things are good. And at the end of the day, look, when you don't eat in such a way that causes vascular damage, right? So when you eat too much sugar and you get all kinds of damage in your blood cells and your organs, like all kinds of problems happen. And we name those things a whole bunch of different things. But a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have that same root cause where it's causing vascular damage. It's just too much blood sugar.
Yeah. So let's go back to your beginnings. I want to go back to career day. When you were a kid, what was your dream gig? What did you want to grow up and become?
A fireman for sure.
Okay.
And by the way, I still want to buy a fire truck. I just can't justify why I would ever need one. Like, I think those guys are heroes. And like every time we drive by a fire station, my family is like, yeah, yeah, dad, we know fire station. We got it. We got it. So
Yeah.
like, I grew up, my grandmother used to take me to fire stations all the time. I used to pretend I was a fireman. And so I'm still enamored by the profession.
So I'm a visual artist and I do shows in Kansas City. And years ago, I did this show where I had when my son, like by the time he was 3 or 4, he had collected all these toys and all this stuff, just things that we all collect as family people. And I put them all on boards and spray painted them. And there was an old firehouse that turned into an art museum. And I had an art opening, and it was to this day one of the coolest things in the world. The pole was in there, and
Yeah.
they lived upstairs, and the gallery was downstairs. But how cool would that be to live in a firehouse full time? You
Oh
know?
my gosh, that would be, yeah. I'm not going to say that my sons and my daughter had all of the Lego Fire City,
Yeah.
like everything, and I'm sure it was for them, not for me.
So where were you born and raised? Where did this all begin for you?
Yeah, so I grew up in Southern California, so just
Okay.
outside Los Angeles in suburbs, so South Pasadena primarily, and then moved all over the country chasing a job for 11 years and did had a lot of success there, and then landed ultimately in Austin about 20 years ago.
Okay. So what were the early seeds that were planted into you that gave you this backbone of empiricism, leadership, and business and all of these things that have become who you are today? How did that happen?
Yeah, I started my undergraduate journey at USC, and there was an honors program where I got to work in a lab that was studying HIV, and so that was super cool. I really enjoyed all the sciences, and I got to work in this lab and see what was going on there. And then I moved away from the sciences for a while in my career, but have always been very interested in that. And then I got very interested in psychology, and so I've spent a lot of my career in organizational behavior and organizational development and behavior change of companies. And then as I kind of saw these things happening in companies, you realize that changing a company is really about changing people, right? And then once you change people in one environment, you see that people are people in many environments. And so eventually what happened was that my mother-in-law, who has type 2 diabetes and has given me permission to speak about it publicly, had an event It doesn't matter what it's called, but she ended up in the hospital. It was unnecessary, could have been managed better. And so I went back to USC and got my doctorate and said, I want to solve this problem. And we did it. We solved the problem. And it's
Wow.
been kind of a rocket ship ever since.
That's amazing. So going back to the COVID thing, did you ever think, based on looking at HIV early on in your life and the way that viral things and other things can mutate, that we would ever get to a point where the world would shut down?
I never saw it coming. I think I was as surprised as the next person. Like I think we talk about those kind of black swan events, and the reality is, if you look at all of history, these types of things have happened. They're hard to predict. And certainly this isn't my area of expertise, but 100% sure I didn't see it coming.
Yeah. The beauty of what you're doing and what, the scientific community has done is they've saved so many lives, generations of people with advancements. But in the anthology and the annals of scientific research and discovery, what is your favorite breakthrough? The thing that you look at and marvel at and think it's one of the greatest things that humans ever did?
It's a great question. I would say that it might not be the scientific thing you would guess, but I think the printing press really made all of it possible because allowed for mass education. And now in the world of the internet and AI, I can go to the frontier of knowledge so quickly, and I can consume much more information. I've got to be careful about hallucination with AI in particular. And so I think, the ability to have access to and consume massive amounts of information today is more amazing than it's ever been. And so I think that was probably a surprising answer for you, but I think that's probably the one I'd point back to.
I love it. And I think about that because I was in communication studies and I did journalism, and Johann Gutenberg was the one that came up with the first level of movable type. But it was actually the Chinese that did it, but there was too many characters. So they were the
Yeah.
ones that came up, but you can't put all that out on a printing
Yeah.
press the way you can English with 26 characters. So it's interesting. But I would have never thought that answer, but it's totally true because the dissemination of information has enabled scientific communities and all these communities to be able to put out their ideas, because if you don't get it, if that dove doesn't drop that little note into your
Yeah.
lap, it's not gonna arrive. So
We talk a lot about strong convictions loosely held, and I think great scientists that have strong convictions about the frontier of knowledge, but they're loosely held when new data arrives on the scene.
yeah.
And so I think I wish that two things I would wish for society more broadly. My doctorate's in social work, right? So I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor of social work. And so I would wish for just more empathy broadly because I think our society needs that today more than ever.
Yeah.
And then I wish that people had a little bit more scientific bent about understanding the landscape before the reaction.
Yeah.
I joke with my kids, you should fact before you feel.
Yeah. I totally get it. And I think about, the social psychologist Malcolm Gladwell, what he's doing and how he imbues those little nuggets of wisdom that you're talking about not
Yeah.
being necessarily reactionary, but analyzing how we get to where we are and
Yeah.
how we can effectively get there by using our wisdom as our backbone. You
Yeah,
know,
that's right.
it's amazing. So, who has been that inspirational force in your life and your career that's allowed you to navigate to this place in your life today?
It's a really long list. At the top of the list is my mom. She passed away, gosh, 9 years ago. But certainly, number one superhero in my life was my mom. And then there's just been a huge number of people from Gemma Prado, who was my 11th grade math teacher. Greg Ring taught biology in high school for me. And then I go into, people in college. There's a number of people. Steve Walsh, probably principal among them, is one of my mentors and sits on the board of my company today, but he was a professor for me early in life. And then, people that I collaborate with, Amar Devay, Scott Dennis, were early career guys that really inspired me. Then today, people like Dr. Ken Wells, who sits on the board of my company and mentors me. So I've always tried to have two or three mentors at a given time along the way. Gordy DeMarais as kind of a whole life mentor would be very high on the list. And then my wife has been the most supportive person you could ever imagine in the process. But I've also tried to have people behind me that I give back to, and the interesting part is that I probably learn as much from the people that I'm attempting to mentor as they learn from me. And so I think that giving back without strings attached and then asking people to lean in and that list is so long. I think about, you know, Brian Fenske was an attorney I had early in my career who we couldn't afford as a company. He was a big, big, big name attorney. And he was like, I'm not going to bill you for this because you can't afford it, but I want to help. And I've thought, how many, I need to give that back 100 times to people. Like I need to be out there and just remember that I didn't do any of what I did on my own. No, none of it. I mean, Jen Lewis, when I was getting my doctorate, I wouldn't have made it through without her guidance and help and support. She sharpened so much of my thinking.
And with all these folks that you're talking about, there's so many inspirational, wonderful figures that exist in the world. If you can meet one person alive on the planet that is monumental, that's doing wonderful work, who would you love to meet that might help you on your journey?
Alive on the planet today. Boy, I usually get the anytime in history question. I was ready
Well,
for
let's
that one.
let's do the ghost. We'll open the door up to the ghosts. That's fine.
The ghost is easy because I'm a Catholic, and so I think Jesus would be the most interesting because I
Yeah.
could ask any question and get that. So that's a no-brainer for me. Today, if I could meet anybody on the planet and talk to them, boy, I'd really, yeah, I think you got me here. I think I'd want to talk to, I think I'd love to get all of the living US presidents in a room together having a conversation
Yeah.
about policy because I understand so little about policy. Like that would be one really interesting
Yeah.
set of conversations for me. But mostly because I know so little about that world. And I would hope I'd want to have like a behind closed doors, no media, like no kerfuffle, but just like the real like, explain to me the policy process. That would be a pretty interesting one to me.
Yeah.
I had a chance to meet uh, Henry Kissinger when he was alive
Yeah.
and sit down with 15 minutes for him. So I mean, I still today don't understand what he said to me. Like the guy was just so smart that, I mean, um,
Yeah. He was Mensa. He was crazy smart.
yeah. And so I don't, I try to stay pretty apolitical, but I want to learn about things I don't understand. And as a social worker, we think about the micro level, which is the individual, the community level, the meso level, and then the macro level is like the policy kind of global level. And I understand a lot about systems thinking when it comes to like corporations and all of that. But the part where I've got stuff to learn is on the government side about how governments are working. And so that would be a super interesting conversation for me.
I've heard people that have met Kissinger between his voice and his stature. He's an imposing human.
Yeah. I was a college sophomore at the time, I think,
Yeah.
and didn't really understand what was going. I got invited to a dinner, and I, I was put into a one-on-one situation for 10 or 15 minutes, and just, I mean, wow,
Yeah.
yeah,
I can
mind-numbing.
imagine. Yeah, for sure. So, what is the energy for you every day to wake up to do this work that you're doing, to do your work at a high level, take care of your soul, your family, all of these things? What's that energy for you?
Like, where does it come from?
Yeah, just like what is the motivator for you to do all of this and do it well?
I became really clear about what my calling is in life. And the Japanese have this really cool concept that the ikigai or ikigai, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's this idea that you take what you're good at, you take what you're passionate about, you take what the world needs from you and how you're going to leave your obituary essentially, and you draw a big Venn diagram, and in the middle of that Venn diagram is your purpose. And I've studied that a lot, and I feel like I really have been uh, honing in on my purpose for a long time. And I feel like I'm operating in that purpose for the last several years. And so it becomes really easy to really navigate anything, understanding what my purpose is. And I can say there's days that my purpose in life, what I'm convinced that it is, frustrates me and I wish I could put it down. But because I'm so convicted that it's my purpose, it wakes me up every morning and I'm really excited. And I don't have many bad days. I almost ubiquitously good days. And so uh, you know, uh, I love it. And I feel like I'm in that place I'm supposed to be giving back to the world. And
Yeah,
it's not about what I'm getting for me. It's about what I feel like I'm here to do.
yeah, for sure. So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 18-year-old version of you. You walk up at your age now, and there's a film projector, and you click play, and a 60-second highlight reel of the life you've lived comes up on the wall. Will that young version of you believe your life turned out this way?
Not a chance. Like I feel like I'm kind of here. It feels like by accident almost, but I'm a faith guy, so I know it's not an accident. But no, this was not part of any, and it's so funny. I have a 10-year plan that I wrote my first life plan when I was like 19 years old.
Yeah.
And part of that life plan is like talking about what your world is going to be like in 10 years. And I update it every year or so. And it's never right. It's never been even close to right. And that's not the point. The point is to understand like directionally what doors I want to be opening for myself. And I just keep heading in a general direction. But it's been super fun to watch like how it's gone. And now it's cool because I have kids and I get to tell my kids like my job is to help you live the life you want to live, not the life I want for you. And so we don't have to like know exactly what it is, but just let's just pick a direction.
Yeah, for sure. So in that 60-second highlight reel, what are you the proudest of, the happiest about?
I mean, my faith has got to be top of the list. My family has got to be right behind that. I've got amazing friendships that I'm, really excited about. I've done some pretty cool things as a volunteer and professional that have helped other people, and those are the things I'm most proud of. Those are the things I think will be hopefully the legacy that I leave.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, everyone in a business sense, everyone that knows you in different capacities, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I really hope that for me, I'm a child of God. Like that's the thing that I want to be first and foremost, and I hope that I'm a good representation of that. And I think there's moments where I do that really well, and there's moments I fail at that horribly. And my family would tell you about all those, probably more of the horrible ones and the great ones, which is, it's probably true of a lot of people. And so I think for me, it's how do I go out and just make the world a little bit better place every day?
So in Kansas City, there is a guy that dresses up at the baseball games in a big Pope outfit. And I think about Pope Leo being a White Sox fan, and I just have such a warmth every time I see the Sox because I'm like, how cool would that be if they could just carve out an area for him to sit down with a hot dog and watch a game, like a sitting Pope to watch a baseball game in America? How cool would that be?
Well, I got to ask you though, like, what would it be like for you? Like, super cool, but then how would you feel about the Pope when the Sox are playing the Royals?
I
Like,
think the
that's a real conflict.
I don't know. I think it's kind of like being around a deity like Jesus. Like they just know how life works. They're gonna love it no matter what. It's an earthly game, and there's a higher implication. So I think the real magnitude of all of that would be siphoned down to something that would just make you feel like we're just hanging out. We're just having a good time, you know. But it's
You know,
the
that
So-
that's
the
yeah, that
Sox are
kind of
doing good.
sportsmanship. Yeah, the sportsmanship you're talking about though is something that our world needs more of, right? Like
Yes.
the play really hard, but still appreciate and respect your opponent. And it's not warfare, it's sport.
That's it. And that's the thing with this NBA finals. There's all of these weird things going on. And I've just been amazed because in Kansas City we've had championships and there's never anything weird. Things don't get destroyed. I just don't understand that mentality as to why things have to be destructive. I mean, I was with friends and we were having a toast and everything was great. And it's like that's it. That's the spirit. And the other thing about it is that when you have that parade or you have that gathering, all of those political lines and everything that humans put up as fences around us erode. We're all on the same page and we just bask in it for a little while.
Yeah, someone was talking about uniforms the other day, like for the military and schools. And when you have uniforms, it strips away so much of the veneer that and it'd be great if we could do that without uniforms, if we
Yeah,
could just not see the veneer, but
yeah, totally.
we can hope.
Sure.
We
Yeah,
can
we
hope.
can. We sure. So if anybody wants to reach out, they would have questions, any of the good business that's going on in your world, where is the best place to go?
I mean, come find me on LinkedIn or come to Precina.com or johnoberg.com. Like I'm pretty easy to find. And the crazy thing is if you reach out to me, like I'm going to answer, like yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. And so, and I'm always happy to talk. And so if people want to do that, they can, and they'll find me, I don't know if they'll find me interesting, but certainly available.
Absolutely. Well, I will make sure I will make it easy. I'll put links in the show notes. Dr. John, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. This has been absolutely wonderful.
Thanks, Joe. We'll talk again soon, I hope.
You bet. Absolutely.